Hello and welcome to the African Tech Roundup, episode 60 for the week ending Monday, June 6th, 2016. This is where we round up the week's most important tech, digital, and innovation news from across the African continent. My name is Andile Masuku. Really glad you could join me. Later on in the program, I'll be sharing part of a chat I had with Venture Capital for Africa founder Ben White. Now, Ben's organization recently published some research findings called the 2016 Venture Finance in Africa, which points to growing investor appetite in African early-stage startups. So I asked him to give me a sense of how they came to that conclusion and to give us a sense of what he makes of the VC scene on the continent. That's all coming up later, though. In the meantime, if you're listening in for the first time, an extra special welcome to you. You should be happy to know that all our past episodes are available for you to catch up on at africantechroundup.com. We also love hearing from all of you, so please do keep your comments coming on Twitter and Instagram at African Roundup is the handle, or just post us something on Facebook at facebook.com/African Tech Roundup. Before we carry on, though, this episode of the African Tech Roundup is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/African Tech, with over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, or MP3 player. Now, in honor of the sad passing away of global boxing legend and human rights activist Muhammad Ali, we recommend that you listen to Muhammad Ali, The Making of an Icon, a book by Michael Ezra. Now, it's widely considered to be an excellent study that examines the relationships between Ali's cultural appeal and all its commercial manifestations. It's definitely worth a listen. And to listen to it for free, click through to audibletrial.com/African Tech. Now, this week's news headlines are coming up in a moment, but first, a quick follow-up to our coverage last week of Ghana's top cop threatening to block access to social media during the country's upcoming elections in November 2016. Now, this would be following the example of African countries like Uganda, Congo, Brazzaville, and Chad. Now, I mentioned on last week's show that there didn't seem to be too much pushback on the matter on Twitter, but some of our listeners have since alerted me to the fact that the announcement caused quite a stir on mainstream radio in Ghana. Also, high-profile legal experts in Ghana like Esan Koma and Professor Audrey Gadzekpo have condemned the suggestion, and some communication students from the University of Ghana have even threatened demonstrations. So I stand corrected. It does seem Ghanaians care about the matter, and it remains to be seen, though, whether the government will take this pushback into account when deciding whether or not to block social media platforms come November 7th. In the meantime, though, here's an audio comment from one of our Ghanaian listeners who would be quite disappointed if the government went ahead with that plan. Take a listen.
My name is Isaac Ladd. I'm a young Ghanaian graphic designer. I run my own business, and most of my work is done on social media. I promote my work extremely on social media, and especially when it comes to Facebook. So any attempt to close down social media for even a day would affect my work. And not just that, I mean, the ramifications of such an action on an international stage. I do work for a lot of people outside Ghana, and I mean, if our country begins to get a bad reputation for being undemocratic and all, that won't augur well for all of us. So I'm against censorship of social media in any form. Whatever the reasons may be, I think we can find a better way to deal with them than to totally black out social media for any reason.
Thanks for sharing your views with us, Isaac. Remember that you too can be part of the show by sending us your audio comments on any of the news items and discussion topics that we raise on the show. All you have to do is email hello@africantechroundup.com, and we'll make absolutely sure that your voice is heard all around the world. And now on to this week's headlines. We start with some international news. Bitcoin is currently trading at its highest level since 2014. Now, this is no small thanks to Chinese domestic demand. Some analysts reckon that the 5-year low China's yuan has reached against the dollar has led to locals in that country turning to Bitcoin to offload their local currency. An interesting development, certainly, with major economic heavyweights like Japan considering making Bitcoin legal currency, and African countries still being reluctant to embrace the potential of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general. it remains to be seen whether Bitcoin will continue to be in as much demand going forward. If the predictions that Tawanda Kembo made on the show a few weeks back are anything to go by, Africa could very well lead the way on this cryptocurrency trend. That's if we got our act together, and certainly if political will was galvanized in that direction. Well, we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on this one. Next up, though, Standard Chartered Bank is poised to launch a mobile and online banking app targeting 1 million users in 8 African countries. That's namely Botswana, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Now, the platform is already live in Nigeria and Ghana. Do tell us how it's working. For those of you who are Standard Chartered Bank clients, give us a shout on Twitter at African Roundup. Would love to know how it's working. Their plan, however, is to deliver a seamless online experience across laptops, tablets, and mobile phones, across devices, and also just with the aim of being available whenever and wherever their clients need access. So they also have plans to launch fingerprint recognition technology in these markets later on in the year, offering a more secure and convenient way to log into accounts. Look, is this a mind-bending innovation? No, I guess not. But Barclays Africa executive Stephen Van Coller did call it when we featured him on the show last week, when he said that the sheer scale and customer access that banking incumbents possess in developing markets, should continue to make a complete disruption of their business unlikely. Now, very few fintech startups have the means and the reach to run trials, never mind roll out services to as many customers in as many markets as Standard Chartered is doing with this particular platform. So yeah, an interesting one to observe. Do let us know how you like it as it comes to your country, and let us know if the international nature of Standard Bank's brand has made banking more convenient for you as you've done business across the continent. Now for some encouraging news out of Kenya, where Liquid Telecom, a subsidiary of Zimbabwe's Econet Group, has announced a partnership with the Communications Authority of Kenya to connect 46 branches of Kenya's National Library services with free internet. The project is meant to begin this month and is set to cost just shy of $750,000. What isn't clear to us, though, is exactly how much of that bill Kenyan taxpayers will be footing. That said, each library will get 11 computers each, as well as e-readers and tablets. It said that internet access in these libraries will be free. Now, Liquid Telecom seems to be on a roll because in February this year, they announced an ambitious plan to provide free Wi-Fi to towns all over Kenya. I'm curious to understand what their profit model is for such a project, perhaps offering limited amounts of free Wi-Fi, as well as access to a selection of zero-rated portals, and then perhaps charging users for anything they do further on the network. Perhaps that's what they're doing. If there's anyone at Liquid Telecom listening to this podcast who can shed light on their strategy, give us a shout. Also, if you're in an area where you've benefited from the infrastructure they're building across Kenya, give us a shout as well. We'd love to hear about it. To South Africa next, where the continent's largest media and internet company, and indeed one of the most valuable stocks on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, Naspers, saw its share price rise to an all-time high this past week, reaching 2,320 Rand 73 cents and pushing its market value to just over 1 trillion Rand, which is roughly 6.7 billion US dollars. Naspers are the folks that own MultiChoice, which in turn owns DSTV and SuperSport. They also own a 34% stake in China's Tencent Holdings, the parent company of the messaging app WeChat. Now, that winning investment in Tencent, as well as the weak rand, are the two things widely regarded as the biggest reasons for Naspers' excellent performance of late. Now, this week, Naspers flexed its might again by investing $60 million US dollars in quote-unquote, the world's largest destination for online courses, the American company Udemy. Yep, Naspers is definitely on a roll. If you invested in this firm some years ago, you're probably smiling all the way to the bank. One question on anybody's mind might be, how high can this thing go? One only has to take a glance at the world's most valuable stock, at least America's most valuable stock, Apple, to realize that stock prices are cyclical and what goes up must come down at some point. The question is, how much higher can this stock go? And if you're invested in this stock, is now a good time to cash in? Well, time will tell. To Nigeria next, where the House of Representatives is about to adopt an electric voting system that is expected to replace the current rather chaotic all in support say aye, all who are against say nay. You know that method? Yeah. Well, that's said to be a thing of the past as This development is another step towards the induction of what is being dubbed e-parliament. I wonder if the big idea going forward, or at least in the future sometime, is for parliamentarians not to even have to be physically in a room together in order for parliament to be in session, you know? I think the term that's used is the sitting of parliament, which is usually made in reference to the physical presence of parliamentarians in one place to make decisions for the country, which, who knows, could be a thing of the past in countries around the world. I don't know if there's anywhere in the world where that's the case, where you can sort of log in virtually in order to sit in parliament. If there is, please let me know. I'd be curious to know. However, in the interim, Nigeria is hoping that this new development will improve accountability by accurately reflecting attendance and voting records, which have been an issue in the past. And yeah, so let's see how this one goes. Meanwhile, Egypt's Ministry of Communications and Information Technology has announced plans to build and operate a series of science and technology parks across the country, which will be known as, wait for it, Silicon Waha. The planned project will consist of 6 technology parks in the cities of Burj Al Arab, Madinat Al Sadat, 10th of Ramadan, New Beni Suef, New Asiyut, and New Aswan. Now, the race is clearly on to replicate the Silicon Valley model by taking on the likes of Kenya's Silicon Savannah, the Silicon Lagoon of Yaba in Lagos, and of course, Silicon Cape in the Western Cape of South Africa. Now, the only thing is we've discussed many times on the show that the success of Silicon Valley and the whole vibe isn't necessarily about launching fancy co-working spaces or quote-unquote innovation hubs, much less throwing grant money at them, but rather, you know, syndicating efforts to provide startups with the much needed mentorship, access to markets, scale, influence, expertise that they need to grow, along with the money to fund growth. So yeah, I'd call that smart money, as opposed to, you know, the type of efforts we typically see on the continent, just building these spaces that they hope will attract the kind of innovation we all hope to see. Look, it remains to be seen whether Silicon Waha will succeed, where other similarly branded efforts around the continent have so far failed to produce significant evidence of success. I do wish them well. We are a fledgling tech ecosystem corporately as a continent. So yeah, it is good news. However, we keep an eye on it to see if it actually does produce what we all hope it will. Finally, Zimbabwe's Industry and Commerce Minister Mike Beamer has announced that the country will be launching a trade information portal designed to be a one-stop facility for anyone interested in information regarding trade and investment within Zimbabwe. Now, it's an EU-funded project which will be implemented by the International Trade Center in Geneva, Switzerland. The plan is to provide online access to information related to economic and investment data, as well as current intelligence relating to trade within Zimbabwean enterprises, including duties, taxes, trade agreements, and national regulations. Now, this is the type of information that anyone who does business in and around Zimbabwe will tell you is very difficult to get a handle on. There's so much misinformation circulating around issues of policy and trade that I can see why it would be in the best interest of both the Zimbabwean government as well as foreign investors to know what's up and to know for sure how to operate when trying to do business in Zimbabwe. Now, in my view, this development affirms the notion that despite Zimbabwe's much publicized cash crunch and economic troubles in general, the country continues to be an incredibly important economic player in the Southern African region. And more importantly, you know, Zimbabwe continues to attract the interest and at very least the curiosity of international investors from around the world, which is good news. And so with the week's headlines out of the way, as promised, I'm going to play you a part of an in-depth conversation I had with Ben Smith. Now, he's the founder of VC for Africa, Venture Capital for Africa. As I mentioned earlier, Ben's organization recently published some research findings called the 2016 Venture Finance in Africa, a report which highlights growing investor appetite in African early-stage startups. Now, I asked him to give me a sense of how they came to that determination and to give us his sense of what he makes of the VC scene on the continent. Take a listen.
From VC phrase perspective, we're always talking about, okay, you know, there are these fantastic, innovative ventures. They have this potential to yield high social, economic, environmental impact. These entrepreneurs are a critical driver for economic growth and development. We need to be focusing our attention on their needs, and we need to be amassing resources so that we can better support these individuals. But then at the same time, you know, how are these companies actually progressing? How are they performing over time? Are they investment worthy? for financial reasons, but also for economic and social and environmental reasons. Is there a case to be investing in entrepreneurship? And I think that's a question that African governments are asking themselves, Western governments, multinationals, any kind of stakeholder you can think of, well beyond just the entrepreneur and the investors themselves. Everyone's asking these questions, and so for us, having a network of entrepreneurs, we are in a great position to reach out to these individuals and to say, hey, why don't you share some of your information with us? And at the same time, we can help you benchmark your performance against that of your peers, so that you as a founder have a better idea and a better sense of how your venture is progressing in parallel with the other companies that are operating in your space. And by doing this, start to be able to look at trends as they emerge across sectors or industries or countries, and from that distill insights that are I think useful for everyone involved. So that's where 2 years ago we initiated our own research activities. Really, we're looking at 5 parameters, that breaks down data across sort of major topics or themes like employment, venture performance, investment activity, investor perspectives, and ecosystem. So in 2014, we had 257 companies benchmarked and 71 investors that participated in the survey. In 2015, we had 462 ventures from 41 African countries and 140 African-focused investors from 25 countries benchmark themselves through this research.
Okay, that's pretty deep.
Yeah, it's definitely growing, year on year. It's only a sample, right?
As far as samples go, I'd say it's a pretty decent sample.
Yeah, but it's still only a sample, and it's not, we can't say, and I don't think anyone should say that this is representative of, everything that's happening. Who decides to participate in a benchmark like this, why they decide to participate, there are a lot of different factors that come into play, and that, people should consider when they're looking at the information that's being presented. But at the same time, we see that, as our research activities grow over time, as the sample sizes, grow over time, the data that we're aggregating and the insights we're able to distill from that are getting better and better.
Share some highlights from the data you collected.
Yeah, so, I think what we see, what we experience every day, but also what we're getting back in terms of data, we see that not only are the volume of businesses growing over time, but more importantly, the quality of the businesses are improving. So we know that, entrepreneurs have now been able to secure venture funding in 26 African countries, which I think is rather remarkable. I think just across the board, companies are not only increasing their turnover, but they're also growing their team size. And as a result, the amount of capital that they're able to secure in the form of investments is increasing. So the trends, across sort of all of the key metrics that we look at are improving. I think here we see in the most recent research, 48% of the ventures are successful in securing external capital, which is compared to just 44% last year. The average capital that's been secured has increased from 130,000 in 2013 to 206,000 in 2014 to now 326,000 in this most recent report.
So would it be fair to infer that there are more investable startups in the market than ever before, one? And two, is it getting easier to raise money on the continent?
I think for a founder, it's never easy to raise funding, but definitely on the aggregate, just the number of ventures, but also the number of investors and the amount of capital that's available for the ventures is increasing.
And so given your access to all this data and your links and networks, the networks you have under management, what tips could you give startup founders in Africa on how to land, firstly, seed capital from, say, an angel investor or potentially even a VC, and later various rounds of funding from larger investors?
I think to some extent, entrepreneurs don't realize that their best friend in this startup battle are the entrepreneurs sitting next to them. I think oftentimes entrepreneurs are they're looking too far outside of their direct network for answers and solutions, and really it starts by building a network of trusted colleagues around you, that you can reach out to, that you can have conversations with, that you can engage for ideas, but also for contacts, because really it's a referral business. You have to build your professional network, and you start with the people and building your network from there. And in that way, you will find all of the individuals that you need, to help you get your business to the next level. From the investors, we also know that sort of the most important thing that they look at when assessing an opportunity is the team, the quality of the team. So, if you're operating as a single founder, if you're trying to set up a business and you're working alone, that's usually a pretty bad sign. It's a bad signal. I think a good startup founder is critical, in terms of knowing what they're good at, what their strengths are, but then also being very honest about what the weaknesses are. And that's where you need co-founders, who can really complement, I think, the skill set and round out the team. So you need to find a team of dedicated co-founders who are willing to go all the way with you as a founder in building up the business. And I think by doing that, you make a very attractive case for being able to connect with angels. And I do think the angel, your first investors, they can't really be more than an hour's distance from where you're headquartered. So you really need to start locally and find those individuals who are willing to get involved. But when they come to discover the business, the first thing that they're looking for is traction. They're trying to understand, what have you already done? I don't have time or interest for ideas. I need to see the commitment. I need to see that there's money already invested in the business. I need to see that the founders are dedicated 120% of their time to making it a reality. And I need to see that the team, however small or limited the resources might be, I need to see that they've already figured out a way to actually, not only sort of stress test the assumptions that go into defining the problem, but have actually worked on making the solution very concrete and very tangible. And the more the founders can actually show that the business model has potential and is actually working, the easier it is for those conversations to take place. And I think once you have 2-3, very sort of respected angel investors involved, either with their money or just, by being part of the board, in an advisory role, you really start to put, an investment case on the table.
So I believe you guys are set to be part of the African Tech Conference happening in Paris in June. Is that right?
Right, yeah.
Help our listeners on the continent understand why it's important to have an African conference happening in Paris.
Yeah, well, I just attended one of the first African conferences that was held in Silicon Valley, and I think that these events, and they're happening more often all the time, it's really important to get outside of the continent and bring the story to different parts of the world, and really showcase what's happening. And give people a sense of where the ecosystem is, but also who the different players are, and really I think also make it personal. So introduce yourself, introduce your organizations to other people in other parts of the world, and say, look, if you want to find out more, you've now met us, you've now met me. Here are my colleagues. Come with us, come visit us, contact us if you want information, etc., and get people involved.
What would you be trying to communicate about being a VC in Africa relative to say being a VC in other parts of the world?
I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges right now for a lot of VCs is that there's just not enough deal flow at the size that they like to invest. And that's just representative of a larger problem of, okay, how do we grow the pipeline? And there are a lot of entrepreneurs working on very promising ventures, but if they don't get some kind of support, and if we don't build sort of mechanisms that help these ventures scale, they're never going to get to a size that VCs can invest.
There's popular sentiment on the continent that foreign investors don't seem dedicated to growing the scene in general, or growing the scene from grassroots. It's almost as though they want to swoop in once there's big money to be made, and not understanding that they sort of need to come in early and be committed to the overall well-being of not just the tech scene, but the continent in general, and care about that kind of thing. Do you find that's the case? Do you find there are a lot of people out there with money that could flow to Africa, but just aren't committed to waiting things out?
I mean, to some extent, I think it's a false expectation that investors will ever care.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean,
so we should just get over wanting to deal with people who actually care about the continent.
Well, so if you want to talk about an ecosystem and you want to talk about a community, it's nobody's going to build it for us. We have to build it for ourselves. And entrepreneurs have to come together first and foremost, and organize the community and say, this is who we are and this is what we're doing and this is what we need. And then investors or other people will or will not be relevant for that conversation. I think that the whole expectation that somebody else is going to come and do this hard work, it's just not going to happen. It's a false expectation.
A warm thank you to you, Ben White of VC for Africa, for making the time to chat to me. And if you're interested in hearing the full conversation I had with Ben, I suggest you follow me on Twitter at Masuku Andile, where I'll be sharing the link to that conversation pretty soon. Right, once again, this episode of the African Tech Roundup is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/African Tech. And of course, in honor of the sad passing away of the world's greatest, Muhammad Ali, we recommend that you listen to Muhammad Ali, The Making of an Icon, a book by Michael Ezra. To get that book for free, just click through to audibletrial.com/African Tech and enjoy. That's audibletrial.com/African Tech. That's the week's show, folks. Catch the show again next week, Monday, on AfricanTechRoundup.com at 9 a.m. Central African Time. In the meantime, I leave you with this lovely quote from the great Muhammad Ali. Don't count the days, make the days count. I'm Andile Masuku. Take it easy, Africa.